Unfortunately, the incompetent African diplomats are not thinking outside the box.
Why knowledge matters. Hüstin Laku, Senior, welcome back to the show. So excited to talk to you about the challenges African nationals today face in the Ukraine, and you really have specific insight because you were deployed as an international staff member for the Organization for Security and Economic Cooperation in Europe. Welcome, Hüstin.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, would like me to address your point. But before actually I address this issue, the challenges the African nationals are facing in Europe, especially in Ukraine, and how could we address or what are the solutions. First, I just want to give a quick historic definitions or issues to do with the refugees. If you look historically in the conflicts, the word refugee has to be redefined in the light of today's crisis in Ukraine and other parts of the world. If you do remember very well, in 1990, exactly August, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Correct? We never heard anything about United Nations High Commissioner for the Refugees asking support from the international community to support the refugees from who are affected by the invasions of Saddam in Kuwait. Instead, most of the Kuwaitis who left their countries before the liberation in 1991 in January, February, went outside, not as a refugee, but as a tourist and so forth. And the country liberated, they went back peacefully without having any problem. Now, if you take the issue of Kosovo in late 1990s, 97, 98, Canada had about more than 5,000 refugees from Kosovo who were brought here to Canada for resettlement. The process of the refugees was only done inside Canada, not as used to be. You have to be processed outside Canada and then coming in. Then you have issues also refugees between the war in 1947-49 between India and Pakistan, which became a different country, repatriation of the Indians into Pakistan and vice versa. And then the refugees of Bangladesh in 1970. And then you have the issue of Somali refugees. Most of the Somali, instead of taking refuge in Yemen or Saudi Arabia, they were not allowed. They were prevented. They were not given that opportunity, and the Saudi Arabia just closed the door to Somalia. They ended up refugees in Europe, in North America. Then you have the Syrian situations, where you ask your question, how comes the Syrians cannot take refuge in Qatar, Dubai, Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, all these places? Why is it Europe? So those are the questions that people has to kind of think on it. I'm not going to address those issues, but I'm just going to give us a background so that people could understand why Ukraine is so special. And of course, we had the Sudanese refugees, people who lived born in refugee camps, the victims of war of Sudan for more than a decade, for more than 50 years. Still living in refugee camps in Ethiopia, northern Kenya, Kakuma, Uganda, and so forth. And of course, you have also refugees, the Libyan refugees who are victims of NATO attack, which they removed Gaddafi from the power and create all these issues of the African migrants try to cross from Libya because there's no government now to European countries or member states. Of course, you have also Nigerians, refugees, Mali, Chad, Cameroon, Congo, Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, and the list can go on and on. The question that we need to ask ourselves, who are refugees? based on today's definitions, with the way how the Ukrainians are treated and the Africans migrants are treated in the current crisis. Before I come to this answer this question, there's most important thing that people need to know, the viewers need to understand, that Ukraine has a very special place for Africans. And during the Cold War, most of the Africans actually studied in Ukraine. In 50s and 60s, there used to be a Patrice Lumumba University, which is established in Moscow. They used to take students from Africa to go and study engineering and science in Russia, those days in Soviet Union. And most of these colleges were in Ukraine, actually. That's how you can see the irony. So what is the link here? And during my mission in Ukraine, several missions in Ukraine, I met several Africans who actually studied, who lived in Ukraine for over 30, 40 years, especially from Sierra Leone and Liberia, Nigeria, and mostly West Africa, because by the time they finished their studies in the 90s, the war erupted in their countries, so they cannot go back. So they ended up staying in Ukraine, married, and settled there. So just try to give this background so people understand this relationship between Africa and Russia. And today you will find out even some Africans in supporting the invasions. They are on the side with Putin. That's why this will explain to you why sometimes people take a side. Now let's address these issues of the African nationals who are treated differently than the Ukrainian nationals. Most of those Africans whom I know, some of them in Kiev, Rivne, Sumy, some other part of the Ukrainian that I have traveled, been there. Most of them are victims actually of the political system in Africa. So the political system in Africa made them to become refugees or seeking for a better place outside the African continent. Some of them have been a refugee maybe in 3 or 4 countries. I myself can share the experience also of being a refugee myself, many years abroad. What happened is most of them got refuge in Ukraine, but they are not citizens of Ukraine. They got a settlement, which is citizens. They got what you call resident papers. So they can work, they can study, they can get married, but they are not citizens of Ukraine. There are many of them working in hotels and some other industries, small industries and big industries in Ukraine, all of Ukraine. I always run to 2 or 3 or 5 people from Africa. Now, the question becomes, why is it the Africans who are treated differently could not board the train to exit Ukraine in this middle of the crisis? Number one, let's look back. When the European member state issued a statement that in an event of the war in Ukraine, and the war is imminent, Russian invasion, the citizens of Ukraine or Ukrainian will be allowed to enter Europe through Poland and other neighboring countries over the border with Romania, Latvia, and so forth. And I've been in these places. I have seen it myself, those exits, because my first mission was in west north of Ukraine with the border with Poland. Now, that statement was very clear. It was only mentioned the Ukrainians. There's nowhere in that statement by the European Union include, say, other migrants or other members or other nations who have resident in Ukraine will be allowed. So the statement went over to state also that the priority is given to women and children and the elderly. There is no mention of any Africans or any other nations who are living in or resident in Ukraine. That is the reality. So as a result, the border services officials, Ukrainians, they acted on the order given to them and they're implementing it. They're just working on their order. Now, the question becomes, where are the African missions or embassies in Ukraine? There are 6 embassies in Ukraine, in Kiev. And there are about 18 in Poland and about 6 in Germany, in Berlin. It appears, and this is clear as the African always system, the embassy or the embassy officials in Ukraine or Kiev had no plan for evacuations of the Africans nationals, whether they're students or the one on move or business people or on visitors. There was no such plan was put in place. And that is the main issue here. So people start to criticize, to make complaint here and there, but I think let's go back. Whose responsibility? We should not be putting or delegate the blame or the problems of the failure of the Africans, incompetence of the African diplomats in Ukraine to other people. So the African diplomats, the African governments takes full responsibility for their failures, not to have a strategy or plan of evacuation for the African nationals resident in Ukraine, period. Number 2, you want to ask a question? Number 2, just let me finish. Number 2, if also you look very carefully, and I know this because I asked most of the Africans who were in Ukraine whether they have visited the embassies or they have contact with the embassy. The answer is no. Now, if you look at the African students themselves, they are not organized. And how do you know that? First of all, everybody is speaking for himself or for herself. They are not organized. There's no organization. They suppose, as I mentioned to you, when I was a refugee in North Africa, we have student associations where we know how many numbers of the students in which faculty. So we have a president should have first come out and say, okay, we have one person going to speak to the press or speak to the government officials and things like that. That was not the case. It appears these students there, everybody only for himself or for herself, individualistic system. And that also contributed to the problem, because now if you're just fighting for yourself or try to resolve the problem for yourself, it's not good. Instead of kind of fighting as a try to approach the problem or the issues in this one unit gives you a better way to resolve your issue and will be taken seriously. That was not the case for this African student, because everybody just tried to speak for himself or for herself. That is one issue. The other issue also, you have this, there was an ultimatum was given. President Biden, more than 2 weeks, was saying everybody must get out of Ukraine. The Americans must get out of Ukraine, because there was not going to be any evacuation plan by the US Air Force for their residents. So everybody must get along. You have to do by your own. It appears also the Africans never take this warning seriously, because if they are, then they should have made the plan B, how they can exit out, And I think also one thing comes out, also it appears that they're supposed to establish a contact with the embassies and they try to find if there is any such plan for evacuation been put in place by these 5 embassies, 6 embassies that existed in Kiev. That was not the case also. So what I'm trying to say to you here is that this is from my personal experience. This thing could have been resolved peacefully without any issues. And I will come to that when I say what could have been done better. But I'm just trying to give the illustration to exactly what is all this chaos came out. I was in Iraq for many years during the 2003. I was in Iraq. My first day I arrived in Iraq with the United Nations. The British ambassador, there was no Canadian ambassador in Iraq at the time. We have no embassy there. So the British ambassador had apparently signed a memorandum of understanding with the UN ambassador in Iraq, in Baghdad. That okay, if anybody coming from Commonwealth country. They don't have embassy. So the British ambassador takes the responsibility of the UN employee. So I arrived the same day. A couple hours later, at the Green Zone, Al-Shid Hotel, the ambassador and couple of staff from the embassy showed up, and I was asked to go and meet with the ambassador. And I was told, I am the ambassador of the United Kingdom here. There is no Canadian embassy at the time, so we have a plan for you in terms of evacuation. This is the plan. They gave me the whole plan, and they gave me the numbers that I can call in during the daytime, 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, at night. And I was given also a number to directly can go after work number, go direct to the ambassador, residence. And also I was given a permission, access to the ambassador residence, sometimes in the evening, just to go there and have fun and so forth. I was given a contact of the British Air Force commander base in Bayab Airport in case I have some issues with their flight out from Baghdad to Kuwait or any other, because my job was kind of in and out Baghdad, travel to Kuwait or Sharjah or so forth. So this is the type of the plan that was given to me right at the same day I arrived in Iraq. 2 hours later, I have the plan. At the same time, also the UN gave me their plan. Okay, same of the evacuation. This is the plan A, B, D. You're gonna follow the A, all this plan, and then you have to memorize it. You need to know who was the main contact at the airport. All this. So all this is given to you. So I'm just giving you the organizations. If you really care about your citizen, then this plan should be there. The other thing which is very important also you should know, it appears also these students who happen to be stranded there, they have not, it doesn't appear that they have contacted with the embassy. And actually the embassy does not, the embassies there do not have the actual number of the African nationals resident in Ukraine, whether they're students or business or visitors or the one refugees and so forth. There's no such thing. So
why there's no such?
I'm just giving, of course, if something is not applied, if it is not there, I tell you that's the 3 or 4 points. Number one, most of these Africans are diplomats. They're incompetent, untrained, unskillful, because most of them are appointees of the president in relation to the president, but not experience at the job or qualification on the job merit. That is the part of the problem here. And we know this. All the African ambassadors, very few of them actually who have competency actually appointed based on their job merit, education background, and training, and all these things. And I spoke to a former Nigerian ambassador to Canada and the United States, couple of ambassadors I know, and they had agreed with me in this position, in my point. So this is the point, because when you put somebody in charge of the embassy and this person has no clue whatsoever, just coming to get the cash and go back, and then if he or she forgot that the first priority of the embassy, it is to look after the citizen, the interest of the citizen first. That is the first priority. Unfortunately, the African students, the African nationals, are victims of their own, they're victims of the failure of these people who are supposed to represent them. So we should not blame the Ukrainian guards. We should not blame the Polish. Why? Because for the fact that I mentioned to you earlier, they are just acting, implementing the order was given to them by the European member states to allow only Ukrainians, and that's it. In that statement, there's no such thing mentioned other nationals. We should be very careful when we start to put a blame.
Now, I mean, there are two issues there. One is, that the government, some African governments, they missed opportunity. And on the other hand, you say, well, also to some extent, the African nationals who didn't depart by the time Biden announced that US citizens have to leave, the Ukraine. Now, of course, what is really difficult there is also not everyone has the means to just go. I mean, where do you want to go, right? If you're in Ukraine, not everyone might have relatives in another country. So I think there are, huge challenges. But I want to know really the role of the European Union. Why is it that they apply such a restrictive policy in that they basically leave Africans, nationals on their own in this very serious, incredible conflict that is now actually occurring right now?
Yeah, this is a good question. And the answer is very simple. That's very simple. Number one, if you look at these students who are actually studying in Ukraine, that's why I say if they sat together and brainstorm, they have organization in place, they organize themselves, they can be able to come up with some solutions or some of the way out. The bigger problem they had was they were not organized. There's no organization as such. That's the biggest problem. If you're not organized, and then the crisis comes in like that, the one of Ukraine, and then if you're in the middle of the problem, then forget about the solution. So what you're going to do, you're just going to react to the problem, okay? But not a strategic planning. And this is the part of the living with a sense of planning, organizations, and have plan A and plan B. That's one. Why the European Union have this strict policy or order? Yes. Remember, I will answer you with one question, with one answer. Do you know why the British exit from the European Union? One of the issues is because of the issue of the migrant. Because British under the European Union, they will be subject to the European Court of Justice for discrimination. So they want to have their own refugee policy that they would control. Otherwise, it will be subject to all this criticism by the European Court of Justice, human rights violations, so forth. Now, we have seen already the way the members of the European countries, most of them are treating the African migrant crossing from Libya, right? Or from Egypt, from Morocco and all these things. Are they welcomed? The answer is no. The answer is no. So some government, like the German government, are paying the cartels of these traffickers in Libya to give security to this migrant not to cross to the European shore. And it's become a big business. And it's not secret. It's not a secret. So it means that the Africans are not wanted in Europe. And of course, there's no debate here. If the answer is yes, then we shouldn't be having this debate of the African migrant crossing from North Africa, and then now become slavery, cartel, become a big business to some groups, especially in a country like Libya, which is lawless. There's no government in Libya. So then each group can control a territory, and then they can smuggle people, paying thousands of dollars, and so forth. So this is part of the problem. But the bigger problem is not in this case. The biggest problem is within Africa itself. Most of the Africans exiting Africa because of the bad governance in their own countries. Africans themselves are not treated in the most African countries. Africans are not treated with dignity and respect. So what do you expect this African to be treated outside their country otherwise, with respect? If your own government that is elected is supposed to look after you, is not treating you with respect and dignity, why should the European countries and the Ukrainian treat you with respect? That is the major problem that we, Africa, because these people who left Africa in a search for a better place, for safety and all these things, they have been driven by war, by the conflict, by the government that they have elected. Number three, some of the wars in Africa actually created these conflicts, like the one of Libya was created by the members of the European Union themselves, the NATO itself, to drive Gaddafi out of war. And when Gaddafi was there is a control, there is a system. But then when they drive Gaddafi out on basis which is of interest of the European Union, but not for the Libyans, that create all these issues. Look at Mali. How many coups in West Africa have been supported by French government? Many. Any president that comes support the interests of the Malian or Burkinabe or whatever, that president will not live long. So it is a big problem. It's a big issue that anyone can think of. But in most cases, Africa got independent 50, 60 years ago, and most of it is because of the bad leadership in Africa, bad governance. And therefore, people has to leave the country, become economic refugee, seeking for a better place, for better life, for better future for themselves and for their family, and so forth. So those are the three elements. Those are the three reasons why these things are happening. Number one, because of the bad policies of the European Union of indifference. You know, if they can take 1.5 million Syrians to Germany, why? They took because Germany is an aging society. They need a manpower. So how are we going to do that? So Angela Merkel decided to bring in the Syrian refugees to sustain the German powerhouse industrial country in Europe for a long time because of the aging society that the Germans are going through, right? Even though she got a lot of criticism, but she has to defend it because of this factor. You know, German has to, the industry of Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, Audi, and all these companies has to have people to work. The human being has to manage it or to work on it. The second one, of course, a bigger problem is the bad governance in Africa. And most of these conflicts, which is number three, are created by the former colonial masters or countries. That is the issue here. Those are the three reasons.
Lastly, what do you think African governments could do right now? What will be your recommendation that they do in order to help African nationals to get out of this very dangerous situation they are basically in right now?
So the first thing, the African students themselves should have organized themselves under one umbrella. Let's say, for instance, African Student Association in Ukraine. And then we'll have chapters across the country based on the cities of the students. And then the first thing they should have done, they should have established contact with the embassy's official, either in Ukraine or Poland, where most of these embassies have representatives there, or in Berlin. Then we'll know, okay, how many numbers there. Then number three, embassy itself, those embassies there, one embassy should have take care of those guys, but they say, okay, African students, come and register. Once you arrive in Ukraine, you have to register with the embassy. I don't think this thing will happen. Maybe the non-resident ambassadors of these African countries, they should have come to Ukraine from time to time to check how many. They could be able to check with the foreign ministry in Ukraine to know how many African students are studying there. That can be done easily. Number four, they could have organized a convoy, hiring buses, say African diplomatic mission.
Yeah, but I mean, what can be done now?
I'm coming one by one, so that we know. Okay, now they could organize buses, convoy. Even train cannot take them, but you can have buses under the diplomatic system to actually take these students to Poland, and this can be organized also with partnership with the counterpart of these embassies in foreign ministry of Poland. Say, look, we have a number of African students, we need to evacuate them too, because they are not being included in this European Union statement. We need to have a special consideration for them. So that was not being initiated by the African diplomats who are resident in Ukraine or in Poland. That was a mistake. Now, these people now, most of these, number six, most of these African nationals or students now, they're moved to relocate to this third countries, which is Poland. Now, over there in Poland, I don't know, the same thing should have happened. They should have another people, the embassy official should receive them and then try to see whether some of them have residence in Europe or not, and if not, if they can be able to be repatriated back to their country of origin. Also, they can also negotiate with the Polish government, since these people have a residence in Ukraine. Can they be able to continue under special circumstances to continue their studies in Poland or any part of the Europe? Those also are possibilities open to discussion, but somebody has to initiate it from the higher level. So all those solutions are there. Unfortunately, the incompetent African diplomats are not thinking outside the box. And then plus also the students themselves are not coming up with some solution to help themselves. So if you're not coming with solution to help yourself, then this is a big tragedy.
Well, it's certainly not so easy when you're a student, I guess. When you're a student, you're also worried about your grades. And
it's easy. It's easy when you work in a group. That's why you work in a group, work in a team. It's always easy. You work as in a team, it's easy. But as I told you, the problem, everybody wanted to work individually. Solo doesn't work. In that situation, you need to work as in a group. You bring your minds together, you brainstorm, Yeah, so I'm just bringing this discussion because all of the discussion focus on one thing. But most of the people who are discussing about the situations of the African nationals in Ukraine, they have forgot that there's a responsibility of the governments, African governments, which is now they're trying to delegate these problems, the failure of the African government, the failures of the African diplomatic corps in Ukraine and Poland and Germany to someone else. And it's easy to blame people. It's always easy, but not easy sometimes to come up with, to look down and check this, because I check these things and I've been there and I've seen it. And I'm in contact with some of these people in Ukraine, in Poland. I have some people, diplomat colleagues in foreign ministry in Germany, some former ambassadors whom I worked with when I was in Ukraine. So I have contact with some people as I ask. So they tell me, look, this is dictated by the European Union. I had a long discussion with these people there. So let's take it into account. If we want to have a better world, so let us African governments take the full responsibility, take the first responsibility to respect and treat the Africans with dignity, provide the Africans with better governance, with better education, with better employment. I think not many Africans will come out to actually study and go out somewhere else.
Hüstin, thank you so much for your insight.
Just try to play my part, and also my heart goes to people of Ukraine in this juncture, because I have known them. I'm not denying that there's no racism. There is racism all over the world. Okay, all over the world there is always racism. I have experienced racism myself in my first mission in Ukraine in 2012, where I was called alien in west north of Ukraine. So, but this new generation of Ukraine, they're different. Everywhere is different, but sometimes it's important that we understand the issues from the holistic viewpoint and try to be part of the solution instead of just complaining. It doesn't take us anywhere. And we need to help people who are responsible not to sleep on their job, but to do the right thing for the benefit, because these students, tomorrow, they're going to be tomorrow's leaders for Africa. So with these experiences, I don't think Africa is going to be in a better place in the future.
Hüstin Laku Senior,